Hi everybody, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Kwasi Kwaa with Chop Bar Pop-Up and chef partner at Comfort Kitchen. Comfort Kitchen is a new restaurant that will be opening in Upham's Corner, Dorchester in 2021, celebrating global comfort food and food of the Afro diaspora. Um, First, I want to thank Boston Public Library for giving me the opportunity to share this platform with some really great chefs who I've admired for years. Um, Today, we're going to be making jollof rice. So I'm originally from Ghana, and I chose this particular dish for several reasons. I chose it one because at Comfort Kitchen, we're going to be doing global comfort food. And jollof is a very classic Ghanaian, not just Ghanaian, West African dish that is found at every celebration. So I remember jollof from childhood all the way till now. Every celebration, jollof rice is a thing. I also chose this dish because I found that at the beginning of most comfort foods, it starts with single pot cooking, and jollof is the perfect single pot dish. We're gonna do it a little differently today, but we'll walk through the steps as we get there. Another more personal reason why I chose this dish is because as a professional cook, I think I learned to cook foods from different places earlier in my career than I learned how to cook Ghanaian food. So in fact, I was always very, a little insecure about sharing this dish. Not until I was able to make it for my sister, my mom, and the aunties for approval. So, yeah, it's a very simple dish, but it's a simple dish with a lot of personality and with a lot of complex flavors. So, we're gonna get started in a second, but before we get started, I really want to say, as a black man in this country, as a black immigrant in this country, I think right now more than ever is the time to make it a priority to really stand up to, injustices in all its forms, racism in all its forms, and for Comfort Kitchen, we are very driven by a mission that puts people first, and I think we stand with peace and justice. If you don't know how to support Comfort Kitchen, on our Instagram handle at Comfort Kitchen BOS, we have a link on our bio that leads to several resources that you can plug into. Please support local black businesses. Please support local restaurants. Please support, black owned businesses, period. And stand against injustice. Thank you. Now, we're gonna get started with jollof. So like I said, it's a very simple, very, very simple dish. The base jollof is essentially a rice that's cooked in a tomato peppery sauce. So the rice is essentially steamed in the stew as opposed to just water. I have one large onion here. We're just gonna go, so the cuts on these don't really need to be super perfect because we're gonna buzz this all together with our ginger and garlic. We're essentially making a paste from it. I'm gonna go right in here with all this. You get it all in there. You want a nice piece of ginger. You want the ginger flavor to be in there. Onion, ginger, and garlic are at the base of almost every Ghanaian dish. In fact, a lot of West African dishes have this flavor profile, and a lot of Asian dishes have this flavor profile as well. I love cooking with ginger. It's one of my favorite. I'm gonna buzz this real quick. So if you find that it's a little tough, my blender is also very old, please forgive us. But if you find that it's a little tough to buzz, you can add a little bit of water. So you want almost like a paste, just like that, a puree even, if you will. What we're gonna do with this is we're gonna saute it a little bit. The only thing I recommend when you're doing this, be careful because garlic tends to burn faster than the others. So just keep an eye on it so the garlic doesn't go too far, because then you get that bitter taste in your sauce. All right. While we're doing that, we have everything. So what's gonna go in this sauce is, we have the base, we're gonna saute that a little bit, then we're gonna add some fresh herbs. I got a little bit of thyme here and bay leaf. As far as the herbs go, you could be creative, whatever you prefer in terms of flavor, you can add it. I like to keep it simple with just the thyme because it's nice and fresh in there, but it doesn't overpower the dish. We're gonna have some habanero or Scotch bonnet. I prefer to use Scotch bonnet, but I wasn't able to find it at the store for this time. But habanero works just as well. We have a little bit of tomato paste, a little bit of light stock that we made from the undesirable parts of goat. Oh, I forgot to tell you. So we're gonna be serving this dish with braised goat. So earlier I said it's a single pot dish. If we were cooking it with the goat in the pot, we would first brown it, remove the goat, then do all these processes before we do anything. It doesn't have to be served with just goat. You could serve it. You could make it with any protein you desire. I prefer jollof with goat. I've eaten jollof with goat so many times, and it just speaks to me. I choose to separate the goat and braise the goat separately because, one, I really like the texture of the braised goat as opposed to being in here for that long. The goat needs to stay longer to get that tenderness that I prefer. Secondly, when I'm making this, I tend to separate the protein because, I'm usually thinking if we were making this in a restaurant setting, how can you accommodate people that eat meat and, vegetarians? So this way I get the option of keeping it vegetarian or with protein. I think our oil's getting there. Yes. All right. So you want to get everything in there and let it really get up there. Oh, that smells fantastic. Do your little Cadillac rinse because we don't want to waste anything. Alright, so while that's going, we're going to go through the rest of our ingredients here. So this dish calls for curry powder. I use half curry and half Berber spice, just because I feel like the Berber spice gives it a little bit more depth when it kind of co-mingles with the curry powder. I generally like to make this sauce ahead of time, simply because it gives the ingredients really a chance to connect and have that little bit of Voltron moment. So while this is going, we're gonna go. This is quart of San Marzano tomatoes. We're gonna buzz that as well with our habanero. You don't really have to cut it. We're just gonna liquefy the whole thing together. Alright. Again with the Cadillac rinse. Waste not, want not. Alright. Okay. So we let this cook all the way down. You want it to brown a little, but not too much. If you get a light brown color on it, it's perfect. And because it's buzzed so finely, it shouldn't go crazy with the cooking because it's gonna continue to break down in the sauce. Okay. So we're gonna buzz our San Marzano's and chili. So by the time that's ready to go, we're ready to go. All right. Yeah, I know this thing is. I'm gonna switch burners here because I feel like I want this to be. That can stay. So I'll show you in a second what's happening to this puree right now. So if you can see, it's slowly starting to turn brown on the bottom there. We're gonna let it go a little longer, just because you really want to coax out that flavor from the onion, garlic, and the ginger, especially the ginger. You'll be amazed how much of a difference the ginger makes in the jollof. So once that's good, we're gonna add our fresh herbs and our tomato paste. For the tomato paste, you don't need a whole lot. I would say about a full tablespoon will do. And again, you can also judge based on how tomatoey really you want. I don't like too much of the tomato paste, so I tend to go less. I prefer the fresh tomato in there. Yeah, we're still going. Yeah, so jollof is one of those that, a lot of West African countries, we battle over who makes it better. I mean, Nigeria and Ghana, I think fights have started over jollof, who makes the better jollof. For me, I just enjoy it very much, and I try to even kind of integrate Nigerian and Ghanaian jollof. You see, I add onion. Most Ghanaian jollof don't add red onions. I add pickled red onions, just because I think the onion is nice in it, but I prefer the pickled onion. So we made some quick pickled red onion today that we're gonna use to garnish the dish. All right, that's going. Jollof, you can. It's also a dish that is very, like I said, it's very simple. You could do whatever kind of rice you really want. I prefer to use basmati rice just because I find it to cook more evenly. I also prefer to make it in a larger pot than necessary for the volume, because it gives the rice a chance to really spread out. Because it's cooking in the sauce, sometimes the thickness of the sauce will really hinder the rice cooking completely and evenly. But yeah, it looks like onions are good. Okay, so now we're gonna add, I wanted to add the rest of this here. So I got my big puree mixture to a light simmer here. There we go. We're gonna get started kind of combining the rest of our ingredients. We're going in with the fresh herbs, just to get it to really connect with our base here. So for the herbs, for the thyme that I used about a teaspoon of thyme. I try not to put too much in it because, like I said, you don't want the herbs to really overpower the structure of the dish, which is the ginger, garlic, onion. You want those flavors present. All right. So after the herbs are added, I add my tomato paste. And when you add the tomato paste, you don't want to add everything all at once. You want to give the paste really a chance to cook out a little bit before you add anything else. Otherwise, it's just going to have that kind of, I don't know how to describe it, tomato pasty taste. But you know, if you've ever tried tomato paste by itself, it's very off-putting. So you want it to really cook out a little bit before you add anything else. Usually a good, you know, 5-7 minutes should do it. That might even be too long. Like right now it's starting to just kind of meld with everything else. In a second I can show you guys what this looks like in here. There's a recipe for the braised goat. It should be on the handle. If anyone's interested for that. Alright, so if you take a look, everything that was white and light brown is now, can you tilt this a little bit? It's now bright pink, right? That's the color you want your tomato paste and your onions to look after it's cooked out a little bit. Right? And then we're just gonna let that go for a quick second before we start adding stuff.
Someone is asking, do you want caramelization to happen?
Yes.
And how much?
You want slight caramelization to happen, but like I said earlier, you want to keep an eye on it because once the garlic start to burn, like I said, the garlic burns much faster than the onion and ginger. So while you do want the caramelization, you don't want it to go too far that the garlic burns within the paste and you know, you ruin your dish. What you could do, what I could suggest too, if you want very deep caramelization, you could keep the garlic separate and then add it as the onion and the ginger cooks out to your satisfaction. But yes, you do want some caramelization on it. But it's not necessary for too much caramelization because, like I said, because it's buzzed so finely, it's gonna continue to break down in the sauce as the sauce is reducing. Okay. There we go. Hi, Oliver. How's that? Nice. Okay. So with that done, now we're gonna go in with our curry powder and Berber spice. So Berber spice is kind of like a curry. It's very much, it's synonymous to Ethiopia. It's a mixture of spices, basically. I like using it because the turmeric in it, like I said, gives the dish a different type of depth. I used to do just curry powder, and then once I started experimenting with Berber, I just switched it out and I liked it better. All right, here we go, here we go. Oh man, this smells awesome. All right. So we're gonna give the spices just a minute to get acquainted with the rest of the class. And then we're gonna go in with our tomato.
So we have a question here. Would you ever use fresh turmeric?
I prefer the powder. I prefer the powder of the powdered turmeric, but yes, I'll be more than happy. I like fresh vegetables and fresh spices and herbs as opposed to the powder, but I have never used fresh turmeric for this. But I'm more than willing to give it a try. You know? All right. Here we go. So we got our sauce completely in there. At this point, you want to salt and pepper so that everything is evenly seasoned. All right. I feel like, you know, when I would ask my mother questions about seasoning, and she'll just go, just a pinch. But for this, you're looking at about a tablespoon of salt. But again, when you're adding spices, you always want to go slowly. What I just did there was about maybe a teaspoon, and I'm gonna continue to add it as the sauce cooks, because as the sauce cooks, the flavor is gonna intensify. One of the things that I really suggest when you do this sauce, taste it as it's reducing, because the flavor is gonna intensify more the more it reduces, and you don't want to get to the end and have it be a salt bomb. So I would do, like, right now I'm gonna taste it. Everything is there, but we're gonna wait for it to go longer. So the idea is to let this reduce down to about 80%. And once it's reduced down and everything has cooked together, you add your rice. You add your rice, you cover it. I cover with parchment paper, because it holds the steam close to the rice, and that helps the rice cook faster. Today, for the sake of time, we're gonna do a little bit of Hollywood magic. I have a batch that I made earlier, and you know, once we've gone through the whole process, we can plate and you can see the finished product. Okay? So salt is in. When you're doing your rice, you want, when you're doing your rice with the sauce, you want your ratio to be 2-to-1 for the rice, because that's the basic ratio for cooking rice. Depending on what kind of rice you have, you might need a little bit more or less water. For the basmati, 2-to-1 works perfectly. So what happens is, once this has reduced, you measure it and see, okay, right now I have 2 cups of rice, right? I want 4 cups of liquid. So if your sauce reduces too much and it gets too thick, that's when you want to introduce your stock or water. You know, I prefer to use stock. Like I said, we have some light goat stock that we did here, and we're gonna add it once this is where we want it to be. So once we get the rice steaming, I can plate the finished product, and you guys can take a look at it. All right. When this is reducing, when you have it reducing, generally it's taking a good 10 to 15 minutes to get the kind of consistency and the profile I really want. You can allow it to go longer. The longer it goes, the more intense the flavor of the sauce is. Like I said before, I tend to like to cook the sauce the night before and just let it sit, because the flavor intensifies very much so from that. All right. So this dish is one of those dishes that you really want it to cook slow, but it's a labor of love. You know, you want to monitor the bottom. Once the rice goes in, it's gonna get covered. Temperature is gonna be dropped all the way to about a medium to low flame, and you want to monitor it so that it is gonna stick to the bottom by the time you're done, but it's not a problem. Just make sure you're scraping off the top and not really getting that dark bits in there.
So we have a question. Do you cook it overnight, or how long do you cook it for?
I've never cooked it overnight. I do cook the sauce the night before, and generally it shouldn't take more than 30 minutes really. And it's also going to depend on how high your flame is and how much liquid to rice ratio you have. If you're doing big batches, it does tend to take a lot longer. That's what I was saying about the pan. The pan that you choose to use makes a huge difference, because if you have a lot of surface area in the pan, the rice steams a little quicker. It has a lot more room to breathe. Yeah? All right. So gonna add a tiny bit of our stock here just because I think it needs it. And you wanna add your rice when the sauce is at a low simmer. So that's for the folks that are gonna try to cook it overnight. If you do cook it overnight, before you start cooking it with the rice, you want to bring it to a low simmer before you add the rice. Otherwise, the rice is just gonna soak everything up and it's gonna be a clumpy mess. Okay. I'm gonna taste this one more time. Nice and well. Okay. Alright, that's good. So, I just want to show you all something real quick. When you have that kind of ring of foam over the tomato, that's exactly what you want. You want that, and you could tell when it's reduced down because the lime will drop in the pan. You don't have to reduce it more than 80%. 80% is far enough just to really get everything to cook together. For the sake of time, we're gonna move on, but we'll add the rice here in about 10 minutes. But let me show you the final product. I think jollof, this dish, like I said, it holds so many places for me. It's actually gonna be one of the staple dishes at Comfort Kitchen. And it has so much history behind it. It actually, for as much arguments as Ghanaians and Nigerians go up behind this dish, it's actually originally a Senegalese dish. My mind was blown when I found that out, but I think a lot of the things that we're going to be working on in Comfort Kitchen is going to be circled around dishes like this, dishes from Nepal. We're essentially traveling around the world, with the cuisine that we want to cook. And we also want to, relate different types of cuisines. We want to find the connecting lines between Asia, Southeast Asia, Africa, South America, and we just kind of want to connect all those flavors onto a plate. I think one of the things that I love about being part of the Comfort Kitchen team is one, our history together. Bibla, my partner, we've worked on and off together for pretty much 8 years now. And I think for the longest time, the two of us have always had conversations about, what we wanted the restaurant and food industry to look like. So when we got together and we had the opportunity to really create a restaurant that's very centered around people, community, cross-cultural understanding and collaboration, we were just ecstatic because we wanted to have that community engagement, but surrounded at a dinner table. And that's exactly what we're really getting the opportunity to do here. When I talk about history, the Chop Bar pop-up started in Dudley Cafe where Bibla was, part owner there. And the cafe was so important or the relationship with Bibla was very instrumental in really getting the Chop Bar to where it was able to, launch off and go to other places. So when the opportunity came to work together again, it was a no-brainer. Okay, so we're good. I'm gonna add my rice. And like I said, you can let this go a lot longer if you prefer. I stopped it earlier because I like it to just continue to cook with the rice, and the rice just absorbs all that flavor. Excuse me. All right. So another thing I've noticed about this dish too, when I started cooking it earlier on, I used to always get very concerned that the rice wasn't cooking in time, because before the rice kind of cooks and becomes single grains, it sticks a little bit, but that's all part of the absorption process here, right? I used to get very nervous because I was always afraid that it was gonna turn into, when rice overcooks and it's just really sticky and mushy. It's one of my biggest pet peeves, so I'm always worried about that. But you gotta give the rice the time, don't rush it. Once the rice lands in, and avoid opening the pot too much, because every time you open the pot, you're losing heat. Alright? So at this point, I lower it all the way, as low as you possibly can. Parchment paper over it. Cover it. And it's a set and forget moment. Right? So now I'm gonna show you what the final product looks like. That rice is gonna keep going. There you go. So this is our final rice. So you get that bright orangey color, and you want the grains to look like this. If they stick together too much, two things: your ratio to rice and liquid was off. If your ratio from rice to liquid, if your liquid is too much, what's gonna happen is just gonna keep stewing. The rice is gonna overcook, and it's gonna release more starches into the sauce, and it's just gonna stick. Second thing is, if it sticks together, it just means you let it go way too long, So those are our two tips for your jollof adventures. So like I said, I braised some goat earlier, because I love the goat. I just want to show you guys why I prefer the braised goat. So, if you can see here, I just want to show you how tender this goat is and why the braise. You could literally smash it with the. Can you guys see? So, it's so soft to the touch, it just falls apart on the table. That's why. That's one of the major reasons why I prefer the goat. Okay? So, I'm gonna plate now, and I wanna send a shout out to Boston Potter for hooking us up with these really amazing plates that we've been able to play around with during quarantine. Just working up amazing recipes and dishes with them. Because jollof is such a, it's such a good old home cooking food, I try not to fuss with plating too much. You just gotta let it be the simple dish of love that it is,
We're getting a question about where can people in Boston find goat meat?
Oh, good question. So, I used to have such a hard time finding goat meat that wasn't frozen. I hated using frozen goat meat, but I had a hard time finding it. I mean, your local butcher will have it. It's guaranteed to be frozen, and that's not of any fault of their own. The meat is expensive and the demand is low, so I think for a lot of butchers it's not ideal to carry it. But I did find Sayar Market in Revere. They are a halal butcher, and if you go there, they will fabricate the goat in any form you want. They made me they grounded my goat for me once for a pop-up. And I think after that I pretty much fell in love with them. But yes, Sayar Market, they have fresh goat and they'll cut it for you. What cut of goat? They'll cut it for you. Generally for jollof, I go for the leg because you can braise it longer and it could really stand the excessive amount of cooking. I usually get it cut in 2.5 to 3 ounce portions because if you cut it too small, what's gonna happen in the braise is, you know, it's gonna cook too fast and it's gonna turn to mush, you know. And if you cut it too big, it's gonna take too long to cook. Okay, so yes, leg is. So I also like the leg because a lot of the cartilage and fatty portions that you find in the breastbone are not as prevalent, because once you braise the goat and it gets really soft, what's gonna happen is like the texture, you want to maintain some kind of texture, and I go with the leg for that specific reason. All right. Like I said, Sayar Market, if you go, their only problem is they don't like selling it just by the pound, just because of what it takes for them to get it in. Oh, so by the way, this is the juice from the braise. So this has red wine, stock. It has, you know, chili peppers, a little bit of curry powder. Basically, similar profiles to what's already in the stew, right? Onion, garlic, ginger, you know. So what happens is once the braise is done, I pull the meat out and, you know, buzz this with, you know, the carrot and all the vegetables that it cooked in, and then we get a nice little sauce. And here you have your jollof. So jollof, braised goat, and some quick pickled onions. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Please feel free if you have any questions. Check out Comfort Kitchen at Comfort Kitchen Boss, and look again. Check in with those links for resources on how to help and how to support, you know, Black Lives Matter, how to support your Black-owned businesses in your community, how to support Black-owned restaurants, and please speak out for change at any chance you can get, at any chance you get. Being silent is condoning, and I appreciate you joining me.
We have a question before you end. Will the recipe be posted anywhere, and where can people find the recipe?
The recipe should be posted, both recipes would be posted on Library Supper Club's Instagram handle, and also on their YouTube feed. Any other questions? Let's see. All right, well, thank you guys for joining me, and really appreciate the support. Please, again, support local businesses, support restaurants especially. If you can't support Comfort Kitchen and physical right now, please support another small business, small restaurant that you know. Thank you so much.